everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nothing But Locks podcast. I'm your host, Ali Melnicki, accompanied by Robert Kowalski, my favorite coworker. How you doing, Robert?
Ali, I'm doing great. How are you today?
Good. We have some good games going on this weekend. I'm really looking forward to them. But before we dive in and dissect them all, because there's a lot of good marquee matchups. I know the last few weeks we kind of had maybe one, two, but there's a solid amount of them. But let's recap the betting trends because I know it was a crazy weekend last weekend, Robert. What happened last weekend?
Week number 8 definitely found ourselves wondering if maybe the rise of the underdog is not quite going to be the way it ended up being last year. Last season, it was just an incredible run of underdogs, in at least in pro football, and it just wouldn't stop at all. This year is just a completely different story. And if we go and just break down everything from a betting perspective, Ali, unders continue to stay strong. And obviously, if you just take a look at how it all plays itself out, week number 8, favorites 11-4 straight up with one pick 'em, which is that Minnesota Green Bay game.
Right.
8-4-3 against the spread. Super strong against the spread if you're just picking favorites. Home teams, they were 9-7 straight up, 7-6 with 3 pushes against the spread, and overs led 9-7. Primetime unders, however, they swept the board 3-0.
Always unders, and I'm an under better. I am, as everyone knows, an underdog better. I did go 9-6 against the spread last week, so it was an okay week for me. But as Robert said, when usually a lot of the favorites hit, it's not the greatest week for me because I'm always picking underdogs than I am favorites. But can't always happen. Well, Robert, let's waste no time. Let's get into the big games because I said there's a lot of ones I want to highlight. Dolphins and Chiefs. This is probably one of the most anticipated high-scoring games of the year. What are we looking at for odds today?
Today, we are officially at Kansas City -1.5, the favorite. This game, of course, in Frankfurt, Germany. Quite early here for me out on the Pacific Coast time, but it's still going to be early for everybody. 2 great teams, both 6-2 on the season through 8 weeks. This game moved from 2 to 2.5 to eventually pick before moving in Kansas City's favor once again. The total 51, Ali.
And I'm not surprised. Obviously, Kansas City coming from that upsetting loss last week to Denver. It was the first time they lost to them in 16 games. We had to know Kansas City wasn't going to be 100% once it was announced Pat Mahomes had the flu. I think that's an anomaly. The Dolphins, they went ahead and crushed the Patriots. There's no reason that the Patriots would have been able to keep up with the Dolphins scoring. However, I think that this spread is a knee-jerk reaction to what happened last week. I think Kansas City is a far better team. Miami still has defensive issues, and I think Patrick Mahomes will bounce back this week and exploit that. I think the running game will be strong. I have no problem picking Kansas City and laying the points right here. I do like Miami's team, but we saw this game reminds me, Robert, of when they played Buffalo. They were coming off a 70-point effort against the Denver Broncos. Everyone was jumping on the Dolphins. I actually had one the other way and picked the Bills, so I'm going to go the other way again, and I'm going to side with the Chiefs here. And it's going to be early for me, too. I love my 6:30 games. I like waking up and just turning the TV on. What do you think about this one, Robert?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Nothing makes me happier than to know that even though the sun has yet come up here in northern Nevada, we're going to have pro football happening someplace. And here we are again this coming Sunday. We've got this game, which obviously, as we break things down from this betting perspective, injuries look. This list that I'm looking at is definitely a 2-pager, but no one really significant from last week that's going to be missing. I still think that Miami's got the best offense in this league. And I don't think that Kansas City is going to be able to do anything to contain what Miami's about to throw at them. So I'm going to probably think that this is going to come down to a field goal game. Kansas City being the 1.5-point favorite, I could see them winning this one. However, the one thing that jumps out to me, Ali, is how their points per game have been in the last 3 weeks.
Right.
And that's a really good keen indicator. You're right. I'm going to throw out last week's game for Kansas City. Obviously, no one's going to perform well if you're just, flu ridden. And so even though he played, he definitely didn't look 100%. I think that this game is short from the total perspective. I think it goes way above the 51. My pick here is going to be over the 51 total.
Which is interesting because usually, Robert, do you have the stats in front of you of those London and Frankfurt games? Do they tend to go over or under in the past few years?
Well, remember last year, I think it was Seattle that just completely came back, unfolded and dismantled. The
Pretty much,
weather,
yeah.
right? Weather is always going to be a factor, and I haven't had my weather calendar turned up just yet for what's happening in Frankfurt Sunday morning. So that's the big question right now as to how we're going to look there. But that's the one thing that would probably make me feel that the total wouldn't come into play. But even with that, Ali, I don't think that there's going to be much that Kansas City can do with the Miami Dolphins offense. I still think, regardless of how or where they could play on the moon for all I care. I think Miami goes over the total.
This is still an underrated Kansas City defensive unit, though, Robert. We've seen them limit Jacksonville. We've seen them limit, even though they lost the first week of the season, they limited the Lions pretty well. Chris Jones, remember, didn't play in that game. I just feel like the Miami defense there's still something about them that is just, I think they have a few injuries on defense as well. That just seems to be their Achilles heel. And when they face a team that can drive a force, don't forget, Andy Reid can throw a bunch of things at you. He's very innovative. He can exploit your differences. I just think they have the upper hand on this one. And if I'm going to ask you, Robert, we're looking at two quarterbacks that are in the MVP race. Pat Mahomes is always going to be in the MVP race. I know his turnover rate's higher this year. Tua Tagovailoa has been phenomenal. Where do you rank these two in terms of MVP voting?
I would probably put them top five. Who else would probably be in the mix along with them? Lamar Jackson, Hurts probably. Can't forget about Joe Burrow. He's been red hot since this, basically after the first two games. I had to carve out one for me right now on odds. And obviously, a lot's going to have to do with where they go into the season. I mean, look, Philadelphia 7-1. If they end up running the table, got a big game. We'll be talking about that Dallas game in just a little bit. But I think that if we had to go and choose one right now, my pick actually would be Hurts.
Really? Jalen Hurts?
Jalen Hurts, correct.
The thing about the Eagles, though, they just haven't been as impressive, I thought, since last year. And Hurts, he seems at times off with his receivers. He has committed a lot more turnovers than he did last year. I don't know. If I really were to choose a front runner, Robert, call me crazy. I think it's Joe Burrow, especially from the way that him and the Bengals have started and how they just have walloped the competition this year. If Joe Burrow takes that team where everyone was doubting them to make the playoffs, if they win that division, I mean, is there any doubt he can be the MVP?
No, not at all. You're absolutely right. And if you're going to follow Allie here, go ahead and do it now, because here on the Zen Sports betting platform, we're offering up Joe Burrow at 20-1, which is, as high as you could possibly have a starting quarterback that's, in the playoff discussion right now. Outside of him, obviously, the others that round out the list, from the ones that we just mentioned, Josh Allen's in there at 14-1. And of course, Trevor Lawrence in the higher end of the spectrum, anywhere between 18 and 20 as well.
Well, this is a good segue to the next game I want to highlight, and that's the Bills and the Bengals, a rematch of last year's playoff game. If there's a game where Joe Burrow is going to propel himself to the top of the list in the MVP, it could be this one. Robert, what are we looking at for the odds here?
Allie, we opened up the Bengals 2. And it moved all across the key number spectrum, as high as 3, back down to 2, as low as 1. And here we are sitting again with the Bengals this Sunday morning, 2. And the total is now 49.5.
The Bills have just not looked the same since they had all of their injuries to Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White. Their defense is just not the same. I think Joe Burrow is going to carve up this defense, Robert. What do you think?
This is actually, quite the discussion to have. If we take a look at how Cincinnati has played since that poor start, they really, really have done very well. Look, there's a shoulder injury that Josh Allen suffered a couple of weeks ago. His official status, even this morning, is probable. He's going to be fine. The ones that we're concerned about, obviously, are going to be on the key positions. Everyone's healthy from that perspective. Yeah, Buffalo's going to be without Dawson Knox. They've made well without him already.
I was going to
And I,
say Kincaid is kind of their number one tight end right now.
Kincaid exactly has actually really picked up the pieces quite well in his absence.
Yep.
And then obviously, look, right now, it's Cincinnati's. They've won 3 of their last, also covered those 3 games. Whereas Buffalo right now, they're in opposite directions. Yes, they did pick up the win last week. However, they are 0-4 in their last 4 against the spread right now, Allie.
Yeah, this is why I like the Bengals even more. Joe Burrow's hitting his stride. I think the best is he just keeps cool. We all know he wasn't 100% at the beginning of the year, and that had a lot to do with how they played. I think that the Bengals are in stride now. I think they end up overtopping the Ravens at some point this season and win that division. And this is a perfect statement game. Actually, last weekend, Robert, they go against the 49ers, who are pretty much healthy. Yes, they didn't have Trent Williams or Deebo Samuel, and they made Brock Purdy look like a backup quarterback. And they made
That's
that
right.
team look like not a number 1 seed in the NFC. So this is a team I think you have to be very fearful for. And I think the Bengals win easily here. How about you?
I'm gonna go and finally pick a side and go against you here for one reason and
All
one
right.
reason only. I know that they've lost 4 in a row against the spread. Buffalo has. However, on their season, they're still really clicking very well. They're near 28 points a game while giving up only 17, especially in this particular instance where they're on the road. They're still very, very well in terms of point differential, 26 points for against 18 against. Cincinnati, they're red hot right now. They're definitely moving in the right direction. However, this is very rarely do we get Buffalo as an underdog. And I know they're on the road, primetime game in Cincinnati, no less. But I think that they're going to take this one. I'm going to take Buffalo here on the money line.
All right, let's move to the next game. We want to highlight, obviously, 2 teams that I hate the most, Cowboys and Eagles this Sunday. Robert, what do you got here?
This is well, let's go ahead and see it. Obviously, it's a prime game, of course, just because of their records. They both have a combined 12 wins on this very, very well. I was going to say short season, but it's week 9 already. How does this happen? We haven't moved the number at all week. Allie, we opened up at 3 for the Eagles with a total 47. That's still where we're at as of the time that we're recording this.
So obviously, I hate picking sides in this game because I want both teams to lose, but that's not going to happen. When I look, Robert, and you're going to think I'm crazy right now, I actually think the Cowboys are a better team this year than the Eagles. I have said I just have not been impressed with the Eagles. I know their record, but they have struggled a lot in games. They struggled twice against the Commanders this year. They barely skid by the Patriots earlier in the year. They need their defense to make a big showing in that one. There is just something about this Eagles team that just doesn't have the same branding that they had last year. They're a little bit off on defense. Their offense just seems to not have the same chemistry at last year. I'm going to side with the Cowboys here. How about you?
So if we break down this game again from a betting perspective, they seem quite identical. No matter how you break this down, Dallas is averaging 28 a game. So is Philadelphia. Dallas is giving up 17 points a game. Philly a little bit on the high end. You're right. They're not as peak as they were from last season. They're giving up 21 and a half points a game. However, where we see the differences lie in the efficiency of Philadelphia's running attack. Clearly, we already know that they're tops in the league in terms of their rushing. So they're still going to do that. And their offense is still constantly being produced at a point where they're picking up nearly 400 yards a game. It's the rushing defense that Philadelphia has, and they absolutely clamp down on this position. So if Dallas can somehow find a way to break through and start picking up chunk yards by handing it off to Tony Pollard, that's going to make the big difference. I don't think that that's actually going to happen here. So Philadelphia at home, 3 sounds like a really, really solid number. I think that's exactly where it's going to probably land here, especially with knowing that Philadelphia is undefeated at home, 3-0 straight up. I'm going to go ahead and pick them here again at home to pick up the win and move on to 8-1.
This is going to be an interesting crowd because this is another game that everyone's going to be watching. Both teams hate each other. We know that because we're Giants fans and everything. But To go against your point, Robert. Well, actually, I'll go with your point because I'll play devil's advocate myself. The thing about the Cowboys is just when they have a big statement win or they have a big showing, they
Yes.
collapse. You look at the beginning of the year, they dismantled the Giants, they beat the Jets without Aaron Rodgers. Well, just annihilated them. And then they lose to the Arizona Cardinals the following week.
Yeah.
So now that they just blew out the Rams, I do think that there is a chance that they let their ego, that seems to be the thing with the Cowboys. They let their ego get away from them. We know the Rams defense is horrific and that might get in their way. But this is a division game and these two teams seem to step up in each other. I don't know if Dallas wins this game, but 3 points seems like enough that they'll hang in there and it's going to come down to a field goal at the last minute. So I'm going to take the points. I know you got the Eagles, but what about in terms of the total? What are you leaning there?
Very good. Right. So with the total set to 47, I think that that's a number that, because it really hasn't moved and everything just seems pretty much on the up and up in terms of their injury report, I think that this number is going to come very, very close to exactly where it's supposed to land. 28 points for, 28 points for on both ends. This one's going to probably break down to, again, will Dallas be able to run the ball? Because if they have several 3-and-outs, like I expect them to in Philadelphia, because they can't get their running game going, this will probably be the demise of Dallas and make the game go under the total. So my first step is to go under the 47.
I'm going to actually, and I like the under. I always love unders. I'm going to actually go the opposite. I think this ends up being a shootout game. I really do. Let's not forget that the Cowboys are still missing Trevon Diggs in that secondary. That should actually help Jalen Hurts connect with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. In turn, I think Dallas is going to have to go to the air too. I think that they're going to have to get CeeDee Lamb involved. They're going to have to get Brandon Cooks involved. So I think that even though you said Dallas could benefit if they run Tony Pollard, I think it's going to end up being a shootout through the air. So I'm going to go with the over. All right, the next one, Robert, an interesting matchup. Seahawks and Ravens. What do we got?
So Seattle 5-2 on the season, Baltimore 6-2. We took a look at saw how exactly their injuries will play into this particular line, and we'll break that down in a bit. Baltimore opened 5. It's now 6 with a total 44.
Yeah, so I've been saying all year I think Seattle's overrated. I actually think they should have lost to the Browns last week if it wasn't for that final quarter. I still think that they're overrated. I think that the Ravens have been better than I expected them to be, at least on the defensive side. They have struggled at times on the offense, and there's a good chance they'll struggle this game because Seattle's defense is one of the top 5 defenses in the league, in my opinion. However, there's one thing that Seattle hasn't seen this year that they might struggle with, and that's a running quarterback like Lamar Jackson. I think that they're going to struggle to defend against him. I think that Lamar is going to find a lot of open lanes. I think he's going to utilize his legs a lot. For me, I think that the Ravens win this one comfortably, so I'm siding with the home team. How about you, Robert?
Now, if you break down what Seattle had to do to get to this point, and look, plenty to be said about the body of work that they've been putting together for the longest time, and so with the way the teams break down to, again, Baltimore's got a defense that's really, really fantastic as well. I'm looking at how they break down on the road versus at home, and there's really not much of a difference in their splits. However, Baltimore at home, they've been incredibly stingy on the defensive side of the ball. And how do you go? I mean, look, both of them are streaking. Seattle's won the last 2. Baltimore's won their last 3. The big difference here to me is Baltimore's defense at home. They're not even giving up 2 touchdowns a game. 12.3 is their average right now in their 3 games at home. And they're, by the way, they're 2-1, straight up 2-1 against the spread. Baltimore is. I think that Seattle's very well built to pick up a win here. However, I also think that there's just not going to be enough that they're going to be able to handle Baltimore's running. Not to mention what Zay Jones is going to be able to do, and he's going to put up some real damage. I think from an offensive perspective, if you're looking at individual player props, he's one guy that I circled that said, you know what, this is the kid that could probably have anywhere between 12, 14, maybe even 15 targets. He's going to do some real damage this weekend. So I think Baltimore here picks up the win. but does not cover. I'll pick up Seattle here. Picking up +6 is a good play for me.
What do you think about with Baltimore, Robert? Because I mentioned before how I think that the Bengals are probably the most dangerous team on the rise right now. If you look at the division, the Bengals, they're still tied with the Browns and the Steelers, 4-3, Ravens 6-2. So Ravens have a comfortable, well, no, I wouldn't say comfortable, but they have a nice 2-game lead over them. Plus they own the tiebreaker because the Ravens beat them in week 2. Is this almost a must win for the Ravens? Because if the Bengals beat the Bills and go move to 5-3, and say the Ravens lose to the Seahawks and are at what, 6-3, that's a half a game behind. Should they be worried? Is this almost a must win for the Ravens?
I think that the way that the team is built, and how fortunate they've been so far this year, look, I guess it's really never fortunate when you lose J.K. Dobbins literally in week 1 with an Achilles tear, but they've got depth, and the depth has been helping them greatly. And I think that they've got the positioning to not only win this division, Allie, I'll go ahead and say that they'll make it really far into the playoffs. As a matter of fact, I think that they're going to end up going to the AFC Championship.
The Ravens, huh?
The Ravens, yeah, that's my pick.
Lamar seems to struggle when it comes to the playoffs. So, and we always have to. I hate to say it because I hate injuries, but as he can be injury prone always toward the second half of the season. So
that he has shown a track record for it, a propensity. Exactly. I really think that this is the year that they've put it all together. AFC Championship or bust for Baltimore, and I think that their schedule plays out well for them. I think that they're going to win this division, Allie. I really do.
All right, let's move on to, I believe, the Monday night game, Robert. Chargers and Jets. What do we got?
Exactly right. So the Chargers are visiting the New York Jets. Don't know if, again, the schedule makers thought that on Monday, November 6th, that this was going to be the matchup that they get. But, somehow the Jets are 4-3. So incredible job on their part. We opened up the Chargers as a 2-point favorite. Here we are Sunday morning as high as 3.5 with a total 40.
Well, they should be 3-4, but just don't get me started on that horrific thing we called the football game last week, which I'll get to in a little bit. But anyway, the Chargers have been one of the most disappointing teams this year. I think everyone expected them to battle it out with Kansas City. I know that they lost that playoff game to the Jaguars, but there's no denying that they have a top offense in the league. Justin Herbert's a top 5 quarterback. Their defense was billed as good. It just has not been good at all this year. Now they're playing a Jets team that has a very good defense. Say what you want about the offense and Zach Wilson, but that Jet defense is very good. And I will say one thing about Justin Herbert. He is prone to throw interceptions. When you look at Sauce Gardner and the rest of that secondary, they must be licking their chops knowing that Justin Herbert's going to be going deep down the field. I think this is a terrible matchup for the Chargers, offense and defense. One thing Zach Wilson has kind of excelled in, I don't know if you say excelled, but against subpar defenses, he hasn't done a bad job this year. And who has done a better job, who's actually should be the MVP of that team, is Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall is going to run all over the Chargers this weekend. And I think the Jets defense is going to stifle Justin Herbert in that offense. This one, I'm going to predict that the Jets not even cover. They win it outright. How about you, Robert?
Are you reading my sheets, Allie?
Why? Did you do the same?
Breece Hall obviously had a significant injury on his part, right? And we knew it was going to take a while for him to come back. And I probably figured around week 5, he would be around 80%. And then by week 7, week 8, he'd be around 90. So he's 100% right now, without a doubt. Allie, I think we got the wrong favorite here on Monday night. I really do. I mean, the Jets are wildly anemic when it comes to scoring, right? However, the defense makes up a grand chunk of that. Only scoring 18 points a game at home, but they're only giving up 18 against anyone that they're playing. And obviously, it doesn't matter what they're playing. They do really, really well on the defensive side of the ball. With a healthy dose of Breece Hall and the defense that's just clearly top 5, if not even better right now in my eyes, in my perspective. I think that the Jets definitely have the right position to cover the 3.5. They're able to have outside containment, and it won't be much of an effort to do that. Really, the big question is it's not going to be Herbert. I think it's, containing Eckler. And if they could contain Eckler, they're going to win this game. They're going to win this game. 3-1 on the season. The Jets are against the spread at home. Winners of their last three. It's a great spot here to back the Jets.
All right, so we're in agreement on this one. All right, Robert, I hate to do this, but last one we're going to highlight before we get into our rapid fire round. Our New York Giants and the dumpster fire Raiders. I think we have a lot to talk about between these two teams. But before we open a Pandora's box, let's talk about what the odds are right now. Giants and Raiders, Robert, go.
So before the rash of firings and accusations and finger pointings, the Raiders were a 3.5-point favorite. It's 1.5 right now with the total all the way down to 37, Allie.
Yeah. Well, let's rewind to last week where Tyrod Taylor goes down. I'm like, oh man, we're losing this game by a lot. We have our third stringer coming in. The minute I saw Tommy DeVito, I was like, this guy can't throw. I don't even know why he's a third string quarterback on our team. Anyway, we get in a position to win with less than a minute to go. Well, a little less than 2 minutes to go. Run it down the field. Just give it to Saquon. It's 4th and 1. I turned to my friend at the bar and I said, they better just go for it because I don't trust Graham Gano because he's been missing all season, Robert. I said, he's already missing this game. Give it to Saquon. We get a first down. Game's over. Iced. Even if we don't, at least we drill a few more seconds off the clock. Of course, they kick the field goal and Graham Gano misses it. And I said from that second, we're losing this game. So I don't want to talk what happened about it anymore. We know that they lost in overtime. It was an ugly game. But now that we're going against the Raiders and Daniel Jones is back, I feel a lot more confident. I think that Daniel Jones really got the raw end of the straw at the beginning of the year because our offensive line was that atrocious. He had to play, I believe, 3 games without Saquon Barkley, so he had no help whatsoever there. Tyrod Taylor, if you remember, against the Bills and against the Commanders, he did have Barkley. He also had Justin Pugh, who's been a big help on that offensive line. And I think and last week we had our center return. So this offensive line is getting healthier, and Andrew Thomas does have a legit chance to play this weekend. I really think, even with Darren Waller, I think we come out strong on offense. I think that there's a rally behind Jones. I know that the playoffs are probably not in our future, but I think this is a game that it just seems everyone's coming back together. The defense looks good. I'm going with the Giants. The Raiders are just too much of a dumpster fire for me to rely on right now, even if I wasn't a Giants fan. So I'm going to go with our team. How about you?
So I do have a position on here, and we know that Jones is playing. We know Aiden O'Connell's going to be the quarterback for Vegas. The one thing I'd like for our listeners to do is, as you're going to make a wager on this game, I would think that the key to seeing the Giants as a outright moneyline winner is the starting status of tackles Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal. They're questionable right now as I look at my sheet. Thomas with his hamstring, Neal with his ankle, but these are improved injury statuses. So if they end up playing, even if one ends up playing, I think that the Giants pick up the win. What I do know for sure, irregardless of whether the tackles play or not, this game's going to go under the total, Allie.
I mean, is there a Giants game that didn't go under the total?
This game will go under. Yes, you're listening to 2 people that have been doing this for many an episode, and we're choosing a pro NFL game in week number 9 to go under 37.
I mean, look at some of the unders, though, across the board. Robert, I've never seen more 30s in the NFL for over-unders. Like,
exactly.
That I can remember.
Exactly.
It's insane.
No, it is not even a trend anymore. It's just simply the way that the game is played. You're right.
Yep. All right. Time for a rapid fire round. Robert, you ready?
Let's go.
All right. Vikings, Falcons. Vikings, obviously, we know Kirk Cousins out for the year. Falcons benched Desmond Ritter finally. What's the spread here?
Opened 4, moved up to as high as 5, Allie, but now the Falcons again 4 with a total 37.
I actually think that this is overreaction to Kirk Cousins being out. I know Justin Jefferson is out too, but the Vikings offense can score points even with the backup quarterback in the game, who looked pretty good when he came in for Kirk Cousins last week. The Falcons, we know what we're getting from Taylor Heineke. We saw him with the Washington Commanders the past few seasons. He's a good stopgap, but he's not going to make a difference. This game is one where the Falcons may pull out a win. I think it's very low scoring, but I think the Vikings are going to be able to keep within the 5 points. How about you?
I like the position. Okay. I think that really going to see a unproven Jared Hall. We're gonna find some faults in his game. Taylor Heineke, look, it's obvious that he's a backup. He's been a career backup from the better part of his entire career. But I think that the weapons that the Falcons have are going to be enough to pick up the win and the cover. So I'm going to go with Atlanta.
All right, Bears and Saints. Robert, what do we got?
So this game opened up really on the shorter end. We had the Saints 6.5, moved up to 7.5 very quickly. We're as high as 9 right now with a total 41.
And what do we have for the quarterback status for the Bears?
It will be Badgett without a doubt. He is out. Justin Fields is definitely out. So it's going to be Badgett one more time.
I like the Bears here. This is too high of a number for the Saints to be laying points. They haven't impressed me at all this season. In fact, it feels like, with the exception of last week against the Colts, every time I picked them, they have lost this season. I think the Bears will do enough on the ground to keep it close. I think that Badgett is enough that he can keep the game close as well. Same thing with the Chicago defense. It's just too many points for me to lay to a Saints squad that seems to always keep shooting themselves in the foot and finding a way to lose games. So I'm going to take the points with the Bears. How about you, Robert?
It's a good point, actually. If you do find a 9, then I would back it. Now, don't forget, by the way, Chicago, I guess you guys are in. You acquired Montez Sweat. Great job, by the way, on getting an incredible linebacker. But 9 is a lot, and no matter what. And I think that they would probably stay at that number. Anything lower than that, though, it would be a pass for me.
All right, let's go to the next game, Robert. And that is the Rams and the Packers, two teams that really did not have good weekends. What are we looking at here?
No, and this number's moved so much all week long. Right now, we've got the Packers 3.5. The total 38, Allie.
Ugh, man, Rams were one of my best bets last weekend. And the minute that they called that penalty, what was it? Unnecessary roughness. Should have been a 3 and out for Dallas. I just knew the game was going downhill from there. I like the Rams to bounce back regardless of Matt Stafford's availability this week. I think the Rams are just the better team. The Packers, Jordan Love is not going to be the answer. I know maybe everyone's saying we'll give him, more time. I've seen enough. This guy's been, even though he's been backup, he's been in the league for years. He should have learned. He just looks lost on the field. He has no chemistry with his wide receivers whatsoever. I know the running game's been iffy with Aaron Jones missing so much time, but this for me, I'm taking the Rams. How about you, Robert?
Well, these are two teams that are starting to move backwards, but boy, Green Bay, you really have stepped it up in a way. You've lost the last 4. Against the spread, your last 4, you're 0-4, and your last 3 games are all under the total. I don't care if it's Matt Stafford or anyone at quarterback, and even without Kyren Williams at running back, he's still on the IR. I'm not backing a 2-5 team to lay 3.5 points. I'll take the Rams here for sure.
All right, let's go with the team that just blew up their defense. The Commanders against the Patriots. What do we got here?
And because the Commanders blew up their whole entire defense, yes, New England at 2-6, you're our 3-point favorite with the total 41.
Yeah, I listen, the Patriots have burnt me a lot this year. The only weekend I didn't take them was against the Bills, which they won outright. They covered the 9 points and won outright. I'm going to go with the Patriots here. I know they didn't look great. They looked decent against Miami last week, but though when your defense just loses its 2 best players, Robert, that it must be so demoralizing for that Washington team to basically know that your ownership just doesn't believe in you this year. I think that it's just going to be a demoralizing game for the Commanders. I don't think they show up with any motivation. So I'm going to pack the Patriots here. How about you?
Allie, this is 2 teams that really have gotten me stymied. And so if I break it down, I just wanted to take a look at really quickly. New England, they simply can't score. Not on the road, not at home. So my first and good first solid step is to go under the 41 for me.
Yeah, that's a good play as well. All right, Cardinals and Browns. This one can get ugly, Robert. What do we got here?
Yes, it can. The Cardinals right now, with I guess question marks everywhere, right? Who's the starting quarterback? Doesn't matter. Cleveland, without knowing who you are playing, 8-point favorite, the total 37.5.
There's no way I could lay 8 points with Cleveland with Walker at quarterback. I don't think Watson's playing at all. Even if Watson was playing, I'd still have to wonder about that. I know how bad Arizona is, but they do have a quarterback change. Sometimes that does inspire a team. It's just too many points, Robert. I'd rather take the points than lay them here. So I'm going to back the Cardinals. But to your point, I would take the under here as well. What about you?
Thank you for that, please. Arizona, you are 0-4 straight up on the road. Absolutely hapless, not even picking up 13 points a game. Meanwhile, Cleveland at home isn't giving up 13 points a game. Guess where I'm going on this one? It's under that 37.5.
All unders, all unders. I know, I love it. I'm all about the unders too. People are always tempted to take the overs. All right, here's another one that could potentially go under, Robert. Colts and Panthers. What do we got?
Indianapolis Colts, exactly. Well, 2.5 right now is where we're sitting. The total is actually, look at that. It's in the 40s, 44, Allie.
Wow. Well, I mean, I could see that. The Panthers, they finally got a win on the board last week against the Texans. I did pick them last week. I just thought it was a good matchup for them at home. I didn't think they'd win outright, but I knew they'd cover 3.5, but they did win outright. I'm going to go with the Panthers again here, Robert. I think that win was a nice, encouraging win for them. I think the Colts still struggle when it comes to turnovers for Gardner Minshew. So I'm going to pick the Panthers. I know that Bryce Young hasn't looked his best this year, but against a Colts defense that hasn't looked impressive as well, I think that they could do something at least through the air. So I'm going to go with the Panthers. How about you?
Might not be enough, though, Allie. And what I'm just saying is that with Carolina's body of work, at this point, we already know what kind of a team they are. Their team that can't get to that 20-point mark. No matter what, they've shown it time and time again. They're 1-5-1 against the spread on this season. More importantly, is that they're only averaging 15 points a game at home. I think that alone is going to give me a very, very good edge. 2.5, way too short. I think the Colts win this by 6 or more.
Well, you're a little biased with our bet.
All
right, last one, Robert. Bucks and Texans. What do we got?
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers visit Houston as a dog. Both teams are 3-4. However, the Houston Texans 3-point favorite in the total 40.
This one, I'm not going to let my bias go in. I'm going to take the Bucks. How about you?
You know what? Look, 3-0 against the spread on the road. Tampa's really done an awful lot to stay as scrappy as they can. This one's going to be really, really super tight. We probably won't even see this game as we get closer to kick, even stay at 3, might even drop below it. Because of that, I agree with you. I'll take Tampa in the point as well.
All right. Well, that does it for our show today. I want to thank you everyone for joining and hope you enjoy NFL Week 9. And before we sign off, Robert, any last thoughts or advice for the audience?
Allie, absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, look, whole great slate starting off really, really early in Frankfurt, Germany, landing up all the way back into New York for Monday Night Football. All these games that we talked about, plus a ton of player props, all for you right on the Zen Sports betting platform. Hope to see you again really soon.
All right. Well said, Robert. Everyone, take care.